to first of all thank all of you. Can you hear me? Everything's fine?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Great. All right. Well, I had a great time with you guys last year. I know, I've been told that your membership has grown leaps and bounds since the last time, and even just the number of people that are attending right now is really encouraging. So, yeah, I'm glad that we're going to be able to have this time, and I hope that what I'm able to share with you will be helpful, especially as we head into this holiday season. So, as George said, my name is Josh Summers. I run a website called All Things Secured, which also is a YouTube channel that you can see here. My primary goal is just to help what I would consider the average person. I consider that to be you. I actually consider that to be me. I don't consider myself a super tech savvy person, but to find a lot of security and privacy without having to, go all conspiracy theory. And so that's one of the things that I love doing. And I'm welcoming you here. This is my studio here in Thailand. As George said, it's about 11:30 p.m. right now. It is dark outside and it is warm. And it will continue to be warm throughout the rest of Christmas. And so, yeah, it's just the way it is living out here in Thailand. Before we move too far into this, I just want to let you know that I am putting everything that I'm mentioning on the website, allthingssecure.com/NMUG. And that's where you're going to see a lot of the links to videos that I'm going to mention, even just some products that I might talk about a little bit, so that you can understand a little bit more about what it is that I'm talking about. And we're going to be really right now diving into scams, in hopes that we can, by identifying a lot of these scams, we can know what to look for. And then at the very end, I want to talk about some of the steps that we can take in order to mitigate the risk of a lot of these scams. So the first thing that I want to talk about, I'm going to start with the story of a 70-year-old gentleman by the name of Calvin Benton. This is a real man. One afternoon, he received a call from a local number, and he found out that his grandson, Jerome, had been arrested for a DUI and was sitting in a jail cell at that moment. Jerome wasn't allowed to get on the phone, but he had given them his grandfather's number, they said, in order to post bail. Well, the officer on the line explained to the shocked Calvin that he could pay $5,000 at the police station, or they had an agreement with Best Buy. They're trying to pump up because of COVID. They were trying to get a lot more money into the economy. So if he bought Best Buy gift cards and sent that to them, that would work. And he could only pay $3,000 that way. And so that's what he did. He went and paid cash for these gift cards. He sent them off. And no sooner than 2 or 3 hours later, he found out that his grandson, Jerome, had actually been in class that whole time. He wasn't in a jail cell, and now they were out $3,000, and there was no way to get that money back, not at all. And Calvin isn't alone. Last year, scams accounted for more than $4.2 billion in losses. And that's just in the United States. So I know there's a lot of people here from all over the world. That's just the United States. If you were to add in all the rest, it's just that number keeps getting higher. And I know you've heard that the older generation is targeted, but believe it or not, the highest growing age segment of people being scammed is teenagers. It's your grandkids, it's your great grandkids, because they've grown up trusting the internet just a little too much. So this isn't just something for you to think about. It's probably something for you to talk to your kids about. If you look here on this, you'll notice this is looking at things from 2017 to 2020. And in 2020, we had almost $1 billion scammed out of people over 60 years old, but that only constituted 182% increase. Whereas for under 20, maybe the amount was less, but it's an increase of over 800% over 2017. So this is a big problem. I think we all kind of know that, but still, I think it's good sometimes for us to see the numbers, the sobering numbers, and realize that, hey, this is something that not only affects me, but it could affect my kids and my grandkids as well. And so now if you were to go into Best Buy, they'll actually have this. It says, be aware of gift card scams for your protection, just hoping that they can prevent this as much as possible. But in my experience, most people fall into one of two camps. And so I'm not sure which one you are, but a lot of people either think, hey, I'm super worried about this. I'm stressed out. I'm going to become a victim at some point, and I don't know what to look for. And then there's the other side of the coin of people who think, I would never fall for something. Those people are just so dumb that go and buy gift cards. I can't even believe it. I'm too smart for this. And so all of us would like to think that we wouldn't fall for such a scam, but neither of these extremes is really good. So my goal here right now is to kind of demystify a lot of this by sharing with you some actual examples of scams, how they could have been avoided, and then some other extra steps that we can take. And we're going to start off with the most common scams. So I want to talk about the most common scams that you're going to face or you can hear about or see. And the first one is the imposter scam. The imposter scam is probably one of the most common ones that you see all the time. I mean, even just what I just told you, that story of Calvin and his grandson, that's an imposter scam where they're taking and pretending to be with a family member. And that I've had that happen to a number of my personal friends as well. And even college students. They actually called my college student friend and said, hey, your grandmother is in trouble. She really needs something. You need to go and, buy some gift cards. And she did, and she lost a lot of money. But these imposter scams are more than just friends and family. It could also be government officials, right? It could also be employers. It could be tech support. This is also very common. And then it could even be your bank, people calling in and claiming to be your bank. And that's really, these type of scams are just horrifying if you think about it. So how would this look? So let's say, for example, that you get a call from your bank and they tell you that there's been a fraudulent charge on your account. That's something that a bank would obviously care about. That's something that you would obviously care about. You don't want a fraudulent charge on your account. And so in order to verify that this phone number that they're calling you on is associated with that account, they're not asking you for account number. They're not asking you for your password. They're not asking you for your social security number. They're just asking you for your email address that's associated with that account. That seems pretty innocuous. It seems pretty harmless. And so you give them your email address. And then the next thing that happens is you receive this message. Hey, this is your authorization code. And the person on the other line says, okay, you should have been sent an authorization code. Can you please give us that authorization code? Now, honestly, if you look at this, it is a legit text message from a bank. So this isn't a fake text message. This is a legit text message. And by giving them this code, you're actually giving them the keys to your account. So what actually happened here? Well, by using your email address, they were able to trigger that, hey, that forgot password protocol for this particular bank. And the way that they asked to be sent that new email or the code is by text message. And so while they had you on the phone, they got that message in. The message doesn't seem to say anything about, hey, someone's trying, to get into your account. And so you give them that code because you think that that's who they are and what they need. And you've just given away the keys to your account. So that is just one example of how really crafty a lot of these scams are getting. So no longer are we dealing with the Nigerian prince, right? These really easy to sniff out scams, things that just make you go, oh my gosh, who in the world actually falls for these scams? And really, in the olden days, a lot of these scams preyed on a couple of different things. They preyed on our greed, right? The Nigerian prince being a good example. Hey, if I help him move this money, he'll pay me tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's amazing. Our greed, or just our desire to help people. That's kind of the way the old scams used to work. The new scams really prey on our fears. They really push the buttons that make us make irrational decisions, and fear is one of those things that does that. So it could be a government official calling and saying that we owe money to the government in some form, whether that's taxes or whether that's something else. And that if we don't pay, our house is going to get repossessed or we're going to be thrown in jail. Like these things that invoke a whole lot of fear. It could be a bank saying that there's a fraudulent charge, like we just talked about. And obviously, we don't want that to happen to our account. We don't want to be losing our money. It could be tech support saying, hey, your computer now has, maybe there's something that pops up on your screen that says you now have, a virus. And if you don't call this number to get this fixed now, then all of your files are going to be deleted. That just invokes that fear mechanism for us. And of course, our family, if we hear that something's wrong with our grandkid or our son or, our sister or our brother or something like that, and the person on the line is using their name. Hey, did you know that Kezia just had, this bike accident and now she's in the hospital? In order to pay some of the bills, we need your help. Like these type of things, of course, we're afraid and we want to make these decisions that help the people or to remove whatever is causing that fear. So we're going to cover these scams in a few minutes and how to avoid these scams. But for now, I just want you to remember two things. Okay. First, never give out information on an inbound call. So you should never receive a phone call from a government agency telling you about some sort of, COVID relief or telling you about a tax refund or anything like that. Quite honestly, government does not have enough people on staff to make those kind of phone calls. And yet it's very easy for us to believe that. So don't give out information on an inbound call. If they're asking for information, just say, hey, thanks so much. Can you tell me what department you're in? I'm going to go search you online and I'm going to call and then see what's needed. And then always, always, always find ways to verify the claims. I'll explain what I mean about that in just a few minutes. So let's go ahead and move on to the next common scam. So we talked about imposter scams, people that call in or even sometimes email in, but usually it's a call or a text claiming to be somebody that they are not. The next one is the overcharge scam. I don't know if any of you guys watch much YouTube. There's a guy named Mark Rober who does these annual videos about his glitter bomb. And this last one last year in 2020, I guess it was, for Christmas, was about him using the glitter bomb to get scammers. And one of the things that these scammers were doing was they were doing this overcharge scam. And I'll explain it in just a minute. But let's say my friend, I'm going to tell you the story of my friend Steve Bain. He received a phone call from a county official informing him that he had been overcharged on his taxes and that he was going to be sent a $300 check in the mail in just a few days. Now, I mean, at first glance, how could that be a scam? They're sending you money, right? And who doesn't want free money? So he, just like they said, about a few days later, the check comes in the mail and he opens it up and it's actually for $3,000. I mean, happy day. What about that? And no more than 2 hours after he opens that envelope, he gets a phone call from that same person who is just in a panic. And they said, oh my goodness, I just made a mistake. I'm going to get fired. I sent you a check for $3,000 instead of $300. You can go ahead and deposit the check. That's fine. You go ahead and deposit in your account right now and then just immediately wire me back, or you can go get gift cards and send it back. I just need this money back immediately for the $2,700, the difference between that $3,000 and the $300, right? So he got this check for $3,000. It's a legitimate check. It looks great and it is a real check. He deposits it into his account, and then he goes and wires the $2,700 to this account, or he goes and buys I can't remember which one it was, or he goes and buys the gift cards. And no more than 3 days later, he gets a message from his bank. I'm sure you can guess what happened. The check bounced. And so now not only does he not have that $3,000 check, he lost all $2,700 that he sent away. That is kind of just the basis for this overcharge. And it takes a lot of different forms. Like I was saying about Mark Rober, and the way that a lot of these other people would get scammed is they would be told, hey, you are due a refund we're going to get on the phone and we're going to walk you through this. You have to do it online. And so they get them online, they get them to a website where they are supposed to enter in all the information. And as they enter it in, what they don't realize is that the scammers behind the scenes kind of fix something in the code so that when they put in 300, it actually turns into 3,000 and they click send, right? Or get refund. And so now the scammer puts it all on you, like guilt tripping you. Hey, you put in $3,000. We said it was 300. You've stolen our money and now I'm going to get fired. I can't believe you've done this. What are we going to do? And of course, in the moment, like that just like overwhelmed, that worry kind of takes you over and you're willing to do anything to help make this stop and go away. And of course, what they say is, and this is very common, they'll say, hey, just send the cash, go to your bank. I can walk you through it, get the cash, and you're going to send it to this address. And then there's this whole system of mules who move the cash around and get it to the scammer. And you are left without your money because money was never transferred in the first place. And that is so very common. And so, yeah, a lot of times it takes the form of gift cards. You've probably heard of this before, but you'd be surprised at how many people, even though it seems like the most ridiculous thing, but how many people are willing to go and do that because they are convinced that something is wrong and that they really absolutely need to buy these gift cards. All right. So what do we learn from this as we take away? Never, 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 never buy gift cards to settle a debt. I'm not saying that gift cards are bad. Obviously, you can buy gift cards for, Christmas. You can buy gift cards for anybody else. And we're going to cover another gift card scam in just a moment, but you really shouldn't be buying gift cards ever to cover a debt, because that's just a way that these scammers are able to wash the money, where they're able to get money that isn't traceable, is by getting you to purchase these gift cards. And then always find a way to verify the claims. Again, we'll go over that in just a moment. Okay. So next, I want to jump into the third type of scam. Now, obviously, I know there are many, many, many other scams that are out there. I'm sure some that you're familiar with and some that you would maybe even want to share this story. And I totally get that. I can't share all the scams. So I'm just trying to hit the highlights here, especially as we head into the holiday season where these ramp up big time. So email and text scams. Obviously, that, we get a lot of email spam. You probably still get a lot of email spam. Heck, you probably get a lot of text spam nowadays. I know I do. And we generally start to feel like we can get a sense for what is spam and what isn't spam, right? Like I can see that that's obviously spam. This obviously isn't spam, right? Well, imagine for a moment that you get an email. Now look at this email. There's a couple things that you'll notice. The first is that this is a reply to one of your emails from somebody you know. Okay, so I'm zooming in here so that you can get a better look. It says, so it's a reply. So obviously it's from a sender that you know. And it says, all right, I'm sorry, I'm putting this on you. I'm currently in a meeting. Please, I need you to purchase iTunes gift cards, 5 pieces, $100 each at the store. I'll reimburse you when I'm through. Let me know if you can help me with that right now. Thanks. This is pretty common, especially during the Christmas season. If you can imagine somebody's boss emailing them and saying, hey, we need to get these gift cards really quick so that we can give them out to our clients. Or same with, let's say, your son or your daughter emailing and say, hey, we just need last minute gifts. Can you please go out and buy these gift cards? I don't have time. I'm really busy. It's kind of that twist on the gift card scam, except instead of paying with gift cards, you're actually feeling like you're helping out a family member or a friend or a colleague in some way. And the reason is because let's say they've been able to hack into that family member's email account or that colleague's email account. And so now they're emailing from the right email address and they're sending something that sounds somewhat legit. Hey, can you please? So instead of using that email to try to do something else, what they're doing is they're preying on all of the friends and family. And they're saying, hey, I'm going to email all of the friends and family that are in this person's email list. And then I'm going to say the same thing and try to get as many of these gift cards as possible. That is one common way that they use email to scam people of all ages, not just older people. Another way that you may or may not have seen before is these emails that come purportedly from, let's say, Netflix or Amazon or some other online retailer that says, hey, you need to update your payment details, or hey, your credit card declined. We're going to cancel your account if you don't do something now. It's something that really triggers you to have to do something quick. And so you click on that link, update account now, you log in, you update your credit card information, and then you're done. But what you don't realize is that email was entirely fake, and the link sent you to a copycat website that looks exactly like Netflix. It looks exactly like Amazon, and you logged in and you gave them not only your login information for those online websites, but you also gave them your credit card information, including your expiration and the security code. So it seems so impossible that it would be you, and yet it's that easy. Just clicking on that one wrong link, and then all of a sudden you've gone down this rabbit hole where you've given up much more information in a way that you thought was absolutely safe and normally would have been safe. And so obviously one way that you could avoid that is, instead of clicking on that link, actually going into a new browser window, typing in netflix.com and logging in. And if your billing address or your billing details are out of date, they'll let you know. I promise they'll let you know immediately. But the two things that you need to take away from this section right here is that we want to be skeptical of odd requests. These are the requests that come in that just look weird. Whether it's your family member all of a sudden asking you to buy gift cards. They've never done that before. Why are they all of a sudden doing that? Or maybe it's an email that comes in and looks legitimate, but instead of coming from Amazon, when you look at the address, the email address, it actually comes from a Gmail account. Well, Amazon's never going to actually send you an email from a Gmail account. It's always going to be from an Amazon account. Or maybe just the grammar doesn't look right. One of the things that I like to say is that, sometimes our brains will throw up these red flags. We don't know what it is, right? You can't really put your finger on exactly what is wrong, but your brain is able to recognize things that it can't necessarily translate for you. And so all it'll do is it'll send up that red flag. And when you hear that red flag, when you see that red flag come up, it doesn't mean it's absolutely a scam. It just means to pause. It means to take your time and to figure out exactly the best way, the best course of action here. So the other thing that I wanted to obviously say here is to be very, very careful with links in emails. That is, obviously something that many, many people fall for. And it's not because they're stupid in any way. It's because you can't see the link behind a button in an email very easily. There are ways, obviously, to look at the code behind an email, but most of us, our email clients, do not let us see what the link is behind a button. And so generally speaking, I do not click links in an email unless I absolutely 100% know who it is that's sending me that email. And even then, if it's super suspicious, I might just kind of email back or find another way to contact them and say, hey, did you really send this to me? Or I'll, log in and find the website or whatever they're trying to link to another way. But those links and emails are just an easy way to target any one of us. Okay, so how can we protect ourselves? I've gone over, like I said, the three primary scam, I guess, profiles that you'd call them. Obviously, there are so many more, but how can you protect yourself? There are a lot of great ways to protect yourself. Obviously, having a good password is a good start. And then the number one thing I would say is that we need to be skeptical. You need to be skeptical. I mean, start off with just this underlying belief that even me, could fall for one of these scams. And if you don't believe me, I don't know if any of you have watched the show Shark Tank, but there's one of the sharks named Barbara Corcoran. She's a very smart lady, very successful entrepreneur. And she fell this simple email scam. It almost cost her $400,000. Well, how exactly did something like that work? It was very easy, actually. The scammer was able to hack in, not exactly into their email account, but to spoof their email and then send an email to Barbara Cochran's assistant, who is also who worked in finance. Okay, so you can take and, sorry, I got distracted on something. So when she sent, like they sent that email to her finance director, that finance director, it came from Barbara's email address, and she asked her, hey, can you pay this invoice? It needs to be paid immediately. Here's the invoice for $400,000. And her finance director did it because, I mean, that's what an email that comes from Barbara, that's what you do. All she had to do was just walk around the corner and ask, hey, did you send me this email? But she didn't, and she started that wire transfer. Fortunately, they were able to jump in when they realized what had happened and stop that wire transfer. But even Barbara and her team were subject to this type of scam. So it's definitely possible even for any one of us. The second thing I want to talk or just recommend and suggest to you is that you use 2FA. All right, what is 2FA? 2FA is two-factor authentication. If you were with me last year when I made a presentation on online security, I talked quite a bit about two-factor authentication and even passwords in general. I know that there are probably a number of you that use password managers. I use 1Password. There's Dashlane, there's LastPass. There's even Keychain with Apple if you wanted to. There are a lot of different password managers available, and those are excellent ways for a first line defense, right? That password is that first line of defense. Now, what 2FA does is it presents a second line of defense. So whenever I log into, let's say, one of my investment accounts, and I put in my password, if it's not on the computer that I usually log in from, then I will be asked to present a code or a key. So what does that look like? Well, the code, I'm going to show this to you right now. This is actually a fake account, so you don't have to worry about it. But this is my two-factor authenticator. This is a Google Authenticator. If you've never used something like this before, it's a time-based one-time passcode. And so I can use, whenever it asks for this passcode, I can give in that 6-digit passcode, and then I will prove that it's me logging in as opposed to somebody else. So if somebody were somehow able to scam me out of my password login information, I still have this 2FA that allows me to lock that account if I wanted to, or it just keeps people from being able to get in. Now, I've done a whole video. If you've never done Google Authenticator, or there's others like Authy, like there's a whole bunch of authenticator apps. They're absolutely free, which is great. You don't have to pay a subscription service. It's not like a password manager at all. You can do this all for free. And I've got a video setup tutorial that you can watch. I'll link to it in that website that I told you about later, that helps you understand how you could easily set this up. And it's not that hard. Another option, if you want, and this is one that I'm starting to use more and more, is called a 2FA key. I don't know if you can see this very well. It's usually a USB key this one's from YubiKey. There's a number of different makers. What happens is whenever I log into my account and I put in my password, if it's been, probably it does this every couple of weeks, or if it's on a new device or anything like that, it forces me to verify by plugging in this key. So if I don't physically have this key on me, then I can't log into my account. That means that if someone wants to actually hack into some of these accounts, then they're not only going to have to steal my password, they're literally going to have to come to my house and steal this 2FA key. I do keep a backup. I've got a couple of them, and my wife's got a backup. So, that if I lose it, which isn't out of the question, that I won't be stuck with, up a creek without a paddle. But this is just another way to secure the accounts that are most important to you. For me, that's my email. That's a huge one for me. Most banking doesn't allow for at least 2FA key verification. A lot of them do SMS 2FA verification. It's not the most secure, but if it's better than nothing. I do it for social media. Because a lot of people, if they hack into the social media, there's a lot of damage they can do to my friends and family by pretending to be me. And of course, I do it for all of my investment accounts. Most of the investment accounts or anything related to my finances that isn't a banking institution, they will accept my 2FA key. They will accept the Authenticator app. And by doing that, I can really lock down a lot of these accounts and make sure that that people can't get in even if they wanted to. Now, granted, like I've talked about, a lot of these scams don't involve necessarily hacking into your accounts. A lot of them involve psychological, like just messing with your brain and preying on your fears, preying on your emotions in order to get you to make irrational decisions in a very short time frame. So in order to kind of combat this, I've kind of developed, I mean, it's not a big thing, but I've developed a little acronym that I think really helps. And this is developed for email, but it really works for any type of scam if you want to apply it to any type of scam. And it goes like this. Anytime anything comes in, I'm asking you to stop. And that stop is an acronym to ask yourself 4 important questions. And not just for email, but basically for any kind of scam or call in or text. Ask yourself, is this suspicious? Is something about this off? Is my brain sending up a flag that I shouldn't, something's not right with this? Is it telling you to click? A lot of times, they can mask a lot of the links that are happening inside of an email. So even if you were able to, hover over and see what the URL is, I could easily mask that and make it something that, is not, that is a scam website. So even then it's something where you've got to be careful before you click. Is there offering something amazing, right? There are so many times where things that are too good to be true just really aren't true, obviously. And again, we know this, and yet we all want to be that person that just gets a really good deal. So whether it's a sale email, or I don't know if you guys have you seen the commercials for those? I've seen it on TV. It was a number of years ago. Maybe they still do it, maybe they don't, but it's these auction sites where someone's like, hey, I got an iPad for $27, or I got these earbuds for $5. And the way it works is you actually have to pay for each bid that you make. And each bid costs anywhere between 50 cents to $1. And on average, it takes 60 bids to actually win one of these things. So if you win, which is not a 100% sure thing, you're paying $127 or $100. And if you lose, you've paid $60 and you still didn't get the device. So, I mean, again, if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. And then the last one, and this is really, really super important, is it pushing you to do something quickly? It is that sense of urgency that for me sets off red flags more than anything else. If someone is trying to push me to do something, sometimes it even gets to the point, I've heard scam calls where the scammer is actually yelling at people. And that is a very good tactic, at least for their part, because that yelling actually, it makes our brain kind of pause, and it makes us go blank, and it makes us make irrational decisions in the moment. And so in those moments when they're trying to push you to do something that you don't necessarily feel comfortable with, but you're feeling like you've got to do it because my son or my grandson is in trouble, or I'm about to get put in jail because I, didn't pay my taxes, whatever it is, nothing is actually that urgent, or at least not so urgent that you couldn't take the time to make a phone call or look it up or call somebody else just to make sure. And that's one of the things that, I've realized as we go along is, obviously, first of all, if you're dealing with gift cards, I think I've made it very clear that let's stay away from gift cards as much as we can. Even cash. Any reputable company should not be asking you to send cash for any reason whatsoever. There are so many different ways that you can transfer money that is traceable. But once you start dealing in untraceable money, moving, then you have no recourse. You can't get that money back. So if we were to look at Calvin in the beginning, obviously he cares for his grandson. He loves his grandson, and he wants his grandson, obviously, not to be sitting in jail. So what could he have done? What could he have done? Well, he could have easily verified using another method of communication. That means calling his daughter, his grandson's mother, or even calling the police station itself and making sure that he's actually there, or, believe it or not, texting or calling Jerome, his grandson himself. He could have done any of those things, and he could have avoided losing three or $5,000. For Steve Bain, my friend who had this check sent to him, right, the overdraft fee. The other thing that he could have done, I mean, it seems like this was a no-brainer, but he could just, sorry, you can't see that, be slow to send money. Don't do it as fast as they want you to. Make sure that that check clears before you send any money. Or, like I said before, don't send cash. Definitely don't send gift cards. And when we're talking about like email scams, right? Obviously, don't click untrusted email links. That's easy to say, I realize, and yet I also know from my own experience that we get emails all the time, and emails from our friends with links. Hey, check this out. And it's just, I've got something with my family where it's like, hey, if you want to send me a link, you can actually send it over text. I generally don't do email links with our family just because it's just too easy to get scammed that way. And I don't want them to start thinking that I'll send them links that way. And I don't want them to be sending me links that way. Again, I talked about a lot of different things, and there's a lot of tutorials that I've put on this particular page, allthingssecure.com/InMUG. And you can go to that page and you'll see a number of different tutorials, how to set up 2FA, how to set up a security key, like the one I showed you here. I even have a whole video about the stop method, if that's something of interest to you, if email scams are of a concern for you. And so I would suggest that you look at those. I mean, it's on YouTube. It's 100% free. It doesn't, it's just something that hopefully will be helpful to you. But my goal, even my goal for even setting up, I guess, all things secured in the first place, because I think, like I've said before, I'm not like the world's greatest IT person. I'm not the smartest tech guy. My goal with all things secured and with even just this presentation is to help the people that I love, right? My parents, my grandparents, my wife's parents, the people that are most susceptible to these type of scams, because all of us tend to think in some way or another that we're not dumb enough to fall for some of these things. And yet these scams are getting really, really tricky. And they're using a lot of different methods, calling in, text, all of these things to just get us to think that this is legitimate when it actually isn't. And you really need to be careful about what kind of information you give out over the phone. You need to be careful about what kind of information you email, obviously. And then you need to protect your accounts as much as possible, whether that's with 2FA or just with better, stronger passwords than you might already have. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. I hope this was helpful, especially hearing the stories of some of these scams. I know that you probably have many of your own stories, and hopefully we can, learn from all of these stories. And by being aware that they happen, we're less likely to fall for these scams and more likely to be secure in the way that we are living our lives online. So thank you guys so much for your time. This was my presentation on scams, and I would love to open it up to questions if you guys want to talk about some of the things that I was mentioning.
Of course, we do. We have lots of questions. My my first question is about your 2FA key.
Sure.
Okay, let's just be hypothetical. What happens if you lost all of them?
Yep. So the number one rule of any kind of 2FA is backup, backup, backup. So like I said, I actually have two 2FA keys. I've got two of them with me right now. I don't keep two of them on me. So one of them actually stays in a different location. And then this one is the one that I keep on me at all times. Actually, let me see here. Believe it or not, that's actually this one. This is because it fits on both my phone and my computer since I have a USB-C. So it's something as simple as this. It stays on my keychain. But even if I don't have a second key, whenever you set up any type of 2FA, they almost always give you backup codes. And so if you take those backup codes, even when you're setting up on your phone through an authenticator app, they'll give you backup codes, and you need to copy those backup codes and put them somewhere. Maybe you print them out and put them in a safe, or maybe you save them in one password. I mean, that's not like the highest security, you know, if you're keeping it in the same place, you keep all your passwords, but it's better than nothing. Like, just back up those 2FA keys and the 2FA authenticator.
Okay, so if you don't have the physical, there's still some code somewhere that you can have. Okay.
Exactly.
All right, Rob Hoff, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Hi. I noticed you were talking about 1Password and some of the other ones. I typically use the one that comes with Apple and Keychain, and I use it on all my devices. One of my concerns with it is if my Apple password is not very strong, basically people could get into that way. But what is your thoughts on that versus 1Password? And also how best to remember your Apple password without having it on Keychain, which it can be actually, I think.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think, sorry, I had something in my head and it just left me. So one of the first things I'd say is Keychain or 1Password or LastPass or anything, you are dependent on that one master password, right? And so whether it's your, you know, Apple password that gets you into Keychain, or for 1Password, if it's your master password, that's probably I mean, if you're using a password manager, that's the most important password that you have, because that is the keys to everything else. So I'd make sure that, you know, if possible, just make that the best password you can. And by best password, that doesn't mean that it has to be like ampersand, lowercase a, you know, question mark symbol. Believe it or not, mathematically, the longer a password is, the harder it is to crack, as opposed to, I mean, even symbols obviously make a difference, but even if you just used, you know, your favorite memory verse or your favorite poem line or something like that, that's like 10 words long, if, you know, it's allowed, if it, you know, some accounts won't allow for that kind of length of password, but I'm pretty sure that your Apple password and definitely 1Password will allow you to have a super long, and it can just be that thing that you know and you can say over and over again. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. I don't think that would be a great one, but it would be long. And so, yeah. And to answer your other question, it really depends on your threat model, right? There's some people, when we're talking about, is Keychain better? Is 1Password better? Some people would say that they don't trust Apple with everything, right? So Apple, if we use Keychain, then they have access to not only all our passwords, but they have access to our email, our photos. They've got access to everything. So there's a line of thinking that says, hey, the more that I can pass this off to dedicated companies that do password managers, the more secure that is. And that really just depends on your threat model. But having said that, I think Keychain, it's better than using bad passwords, right? So it's that level up and trying to get as strong as you're willing to go without it being too inconvenient for you.
All right, thank you, Rob. Alan, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. That was really a great presentation. I belong to something called UMail, and this this program stops incoming calls that are not in my address book or I have never called before. You know, have you ever had any experience with this company, and do you have any opinion on it?
No, I don't have experience with it. I will say that, it sounds like what you're talking about, I just looked it up right here, is spam blocking for calls and texts. And believe it or not, I actually think that a lot of our, Apple and Android, the actual phone, are getting a lot better at blocking these phone calls. You may not realize it because some still get through, but a lot of these calls are getting blocked before they even reach you. But I will warn you and just say, blocking these obvious spam calls is just one part of it, because a lot of times it's not the ones that look like spam that are actually spam, right? It's like I said, it's someone calling in from a local phone number and saying, hey, your son's in jail or your grandson's in jail. So like I said, I don't have a direct experience with it, but I'm sure it's you're blocking
For
spam. So
anybody
it's
else
good.
that might be listening, it does work pretty well. It does get rid of other things. The one bad thing about it is if it's my doctor or somebody calling from his home phone and not his office, it will block that as well. And so there's a downside to that as well. But otherwise, it really works pretty well. I've been pretty satisfied with it.
Awesome.
All right, great. Thank you, Alan. Jane Tremer, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please? Jane, are you there? There you
It's
go.
Janet. I think
I'm sorry.
it's
Okay.
Janet Reamer. Sorry. Yeah. So I've got this pop-up that's come up on emails that has said, or not emails, but like if I'm going into, I don't know, one of my accounts, not necessarily a bank, but an account, and it says your password may have been attached to a data leak. Please change. Is that legit?
It could be. So are you using Chrome?
No, I use Hotmail.
Okay. Well, a lot of times, sometimes there's these services that will basically check your passwords if you're storing them, locally somewhere, and it will check them against a database. It's not necessarily spam, but I would just be careful about what it's asking you to do. And so, yeah, it kind of really, it depends, honestly.
Okay.
And if you're worried about it, then I would just go ahead and change the password.
Yeah, I've never done it. I've never said, oh, okay, and clicked on it and did it right then. I kind of wait for that company to contact me. If it's legit, I think that they will, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Janet. Sorry for the mistake.
That's
All right.
okay.
All right, Michael Tolper, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Well, I think maybe you've answered it. You said you have a video on how to set up that 2FA key, and I thought that was kind of intriguing, and I will definitely take a look at the video.
Awesome.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you, Michael.
it's a lot of fun. I love that. The key.
All right. Melissa Green, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, yes, thank you, Josh, for this great presentation. You mentioned that links in a text message are what you prefer from your family, as opposed to having them in an email message. Can you explain why text would be better than links in an email?
A couple reasons for me. One is it's not as easy to mask. So for example, I can send an email to you that says, hey, click this link, and it says https.com or youtube.com, and then it's a link, but that link actually goes to a different website. So there could be something underneath that is different than what you're actually seeing. So that's possible to do when you're doing HTML markup on an email, which most of us use email providers that do that. Text, it's a lot harder for that. Like if I'm going to put in a link, then not only is that link going to be naked, I'm going to be able to see it, but most of the time, Apple's going to give me a preview of that link. And so I'm much more, able to see what that is. I mean, it's not a foolproof method, don't get me wrong, but I just prefer it.
Thank you.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
John Prescott, you have an interesting comment or question about YubiKey. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask that question?
Hi, Josh. I bought a YubiKey after seeing your presentation back in the summer, Suffolk mug, and I've used it once, but that's been the sum total of it, and no sites seem to want it or require it, and I'm just wondering if I should be doing something to invoke it, or whether I just wait for somebody to ask for it.
Yeah, 2FA is one of those things that you really have to initiate. So there are a few types of accounts that require you to turn on two-factor authentication. One notable one nowadays is anything having to do with cryptocurrency. Usually they require 2FA to be turned on, but everything else, Facebook, Twitter, even Gmail, and anything with Google, they're not going to ask you, or normally they're not going to ask you, would you like to? You have to actually go into your settings, go into the security settings, and then turn on 2FA. And so, I mean, it would, you can sit down and do it, you know, for most of your important accounts. I don't do it for every single account, mind you. I probably have a total of maybe less than 25 accounts that I enable 2FA because those are the most important accounts. But I had to physically, or I had to personally go in there and take the initiative to set that up.
John, does that help?
Thanks very much. Yeah.
All right. Jean Goldberg, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you, Josh, for an excellent presentation. I have a couple of trusted senders, at least I look at the email address and it is them unless their accounts have been hacked. And they share articles with me that have extremely long links that they have used an app to shorten the URLs. And so should I regard these URLs with real hesitancy, with skepticism? What would be your recommendation for handling these short URLs?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think healthy skepticism is obviously a good thing, but you want to balance that with convenience. And if these are trusted senders that have been sending you stuff for years and then you've been fine, chances are you're going to be okay. It's just that moment when that flag goes up, there are actually services that you can go online. If you go online, maybe I'll have to just add this to our page after we get off, but you can actually search out those shortened links. You can put those links into this service online and it will show you where it actually goes to. So if you're unsure about these link shortening services, there are places online that you can go to where you paste that shortened link and it will actually go through and tell you where it leads.
Oh, thank you. That's very, very interesting. Helpful. Thank you.
All right. Thank
Good.
you, Jean. David Winograd, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, well, thank you for this presentation. You've confirmed so many things that I thought were right, but I wasn't sure, you know, which is terrific. My question is about sign in with Apple. Can you explain how it works and how effective its safety measures are?
Yeah. So this is actually a whole subject matter that I really love. It's probably more than I can really discuss here, and that's the subject of masking. So there's a lot of things that you can do to mask your actual information. And so sign in with Apple is one of those ways where you're masking your email address. You're not giving that account your actual email address. Apple is in essence creating this one, you know, this unique email address that they will use to log you in. In essence, that's kind of what's happening. You can do the same for even your credit card. You can mask a lot of different things, and it really, I wish I could say that yes, this is right or this is wrong. It really depends on your threat model. And when I talk about threat model, what I mean is how paranoid you are. And I don't mean paranoid in a bad way. Are you really are you worried that Apple is just a little too powerful of a company? And if that's the case, then maybe sign in with Apple isn't the best idea. But if you trust that Apple is doing the best that it can to create privacy for its users, and I kind of generally fall into that camp despite all the conspiracies that you hear about or read, then yeah, sign in with Apple is a good option.
Thank you. Is it two-factor authentication or as effective as?
It's different. So two-factor authentication, those are two different things. We're talking about a login, an initial login, and then two-factor authentication would be a second factor on top of that. So there are cases, I'm sure, although I don't have this personally, where you could log in with Apple and it's still, if you've set it up, it still requires you to, give your key if that's what you've set up, or the code if that's what you've set up.
Okay, thank you.
Ward Clark, you can ask your question. I don't know if Josh will have an answer for you, but he might. Can you please unmute yourself? Thank you.
Well, it's not really a question. One of the things that I found very effective is spam sieve, to keep spam out of my inbox. And I have no idea how many scams have been cleaned, but I was just looking that since the first of the year, spam sieve has kept 17,000 messages from my inbox. And I've only added about 300 messages myself that I recognized as spam. So I think it's something you have to pay for, but I think it's well worth it.
Yeah. You bring up a good point that I want to just mention real quick. I don't have any experience with that, but I know that, any type of spam blocking is great. It actually does make a difference when you saw those 300 or so that you have marked as spam, whether that's with something like Spam Sieve or whether it's your Yahoo or Hotmail or Gmail account. They all have that button that allows you to mark as spam. And that may seem like nothing to you. It's like, hey, why don't I just delete it? Why don't I just archive it? But by marking it as spam, you're actually helping out other people. And by helping out those email providers and letting them know, if they get enough people that mark this as spam, they're not going to let that be delivered into email inboxes. So don't be afraid to use that mark as spam button if you have it, or something like Spam Sieve that you were mentioning.
That's a great comment, Josh, to make sure that you mark it. I use Spam Sieve, and there are many people in this user group who also do. So, but I never really sort of thought of it that way. That's pretty cool, because I know that it creates a whitelist. So I would imagine that whitelist does go back to the developers so that they can pass that information along. Great point. Thank you very much. Okay. Do James Corsica, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thanks, Sheeta. Josh, continuing in the discussion about Spam Sieve, I have probably a dozen or a little bit more than that seem to be really hearty spam. Like, no matter how many times I click the train it as spam, it constantly shows up in my inbox, and I have to say train it as spam again. What's going on there? I mean, one of them is from a place called 123 Greetings.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, 123 Greetings may not be spam. I mean, maybe they got your email address improperly, like they shouldn't have been emailing you, but I think it might be a legit website. Here's the deal though, and this is something that I'm having to remember myself. Like, spam is this constant game of cat and mouse, and the spammers are incentivized to up their game, to become better at what they're doing. And the ways that a lot of these spam blockers are able to block it, it just basically works where they just keep getting blocked. They find another way and then they keep blocking it. And it's that ongoing game. So don't think that you're ever going to get to a point where, okay, boom, we're done. No more spam. Spam Sieve's got it all taken care of. They're going to have to constantly be iterating and making things better. And that's why it's worth continuing to pay a subscription, so that they have the funds to be able to do that.
Well, it's a great piece of software, and if any of my fellow members haven't tried it, I think it's well worth the money. It saves me probably 100 emails a day.
Wow.
Yeah. Ouch. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Does anyone else have a question that they would like to pose? Please raise your hand and we'll get you on the mic immediately. Mitch, go ahead.
Yes, very excellent presentation, Josh. My question is, what's the real difference between using your stick for two-factor as opposed to, I usually sign up for two-factor and get a text message. And I'm thinking that most of the sites that I have two-factor on, once I do it on that device, they don't ask me for it every time.
Yeah. No, that's true. And that's the true of most 2FA is as long as it's a trusted device, most of the time they won't continue to ask you. If it's a good service, then they'll probably ask you once every few weeks or once every month or so to confirm that you are who you say you are. Here's the deal with 2FA. There are three types of 2FA, right? There's there's a SMS text. There's the authenticator app that I showed you here. And then there are keys, which is the top. And I actually ranked those from least secure to most secure. And SMS text being the least secure just because of something called SIM swapping. That's where somebody, if they have enough information on you, they can call into your carrier and try to get, to change, say, hey, I lost my SIM card, and they'll go through this process of verifying your identity, and then they will actually move the phone number over to their number. And so now they can receive those text messages. I won't say it's very rare. It's very uncommon unless you're a high value target. But that's why I would say that SMS text is generally considered. Now, granted, we're talking about 2FA. So 2FA itself is very secure. I mean, you're head and shoulders above anybody else. But in the world of 2FA, it goes SMS text, 2FA authenticator, and then 2FA key in terms of security.
So when you set up the 2FA key or the authenticator, and I've used the authenticator before, I mean, how would I, like on Google, how would I go about changing the two-factor that I have set up now and say, hey, I want to use a key rather than getting a text? Or on any other website?
Yeah, you have to have access to your former 2FA code. So, I mean, obviously you don't want to lose your phone number because then you'd have a difficult time getting back in. But you can go into your security settings. It will probably require you to, in order to change any type of 2FA, it'll require you to give the code that you had used before. So if it's SMS text, they'll send you an SMS text. If you're changing from the app to the key, then it'll ask you for the app code, but you can disable it and then re-enable it with a different. And you can actually set up, most accounts will let you set up different types of two-factor authentication just as a backup. So you can have both, like Facebook is a great example. I have both the key and the Google Authenticator as my backup. And you can do both of them at the same time.
All right, thank you, Mitch. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm apologizing if I am mispronouncing your name. Ihor, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
It's Ihor.
Ihor, all right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, a lot of times they ask me to change my password, and it offers me immediately a random one. And I'm just curious how that operates, because sometimes I need to know the password, but I'm not going to remember a random one. So what do you think about using those random passwords?
I mean, random passwords are definitely stronger than, well, I can't really say that. Let me say here. What would be the best way to answer this? The best way to answer this, I think, would be to say that if you're really worried about passwords, that's where a password manager really comes in handy, whether it's Keychain, 1Password, or whatever. It allows you to, it helps you store those random passwords so that you don't have to remember them. All you have to remember is that one master password that lets you into everything else. And then I would be cautious. I don't know. I would just be cautious about who is giving you this random password. Not because I think there's any risk, any funny business happening, but it's like a lot of times you know, it's just they're coming up with a randomly generated password, and maybe it's not the best that it could be, you know, and so that's why I generally like to stick with a password manager.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Alan, do you have a quick question? Unmute yourself.
Yes, early on when spam was a problem, I was told, or I learned somewhere, that there were two kinds of addresses. There's HTMI and HTMIS. And the S was a more secure one. And if it was an S HTMI address, it was probably okay. But if it was not an S one, you definitely want to deal with it. Is there anything further about that S business?
Yeah, so what you're referring to is actually before the URL, the HTTP and HTTPS. Normally nowadays, in your browser, it'll show up as a lock icon. So a lot of times we don't even see the HTTP or HTTPS. It'll just be this lock icon. And what I would say about that, I'll just make this really simple here, is that the lock icon is a good trust indicator, but it's not a foolproof end all be all. If you see that lock, that means it's not a scam site. However, if you see the padlock opened, or if you see that your browser says that this is not a secure website, if you see the opposite, then I would say without hesitation, do not ever put your credit card information in, do not put your email in, do not just move away from that website. So while the HTTPS and the lock don't always indicate that it's a trustworthy site, not having that always indicates that it's not a trustworthy site.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. David Winograd, you have a quick question?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you get a mail from a company, and I mean, I've seen a bunch of these and they're fine, but I know some of them aren't. Where you get a mail that says, okay, or we want to change your password, put in your email, you know, we will send you something to your email. If they do that, how do they spoof your email by receiving that so you don't get it? You know, or it just sounds like if they send it to me, how does it work that they get this information?
I'm not entirely clear, like how would, if they're resetting the password, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, if they're resetting the password and they're saying they're going to send a code to my email.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, the example I gave, and this is why it was so tricky and so sneaky to me, because you're right. If you're having them reset your password via email, then yeah, they would have to have access to your email in order to do that. But what I was saying is they were actually on the phone with my friend Steve, and they were saying, hey, we're your bank, and what they did is, instead of asking for a reset via email, they asked for a reset via text message. And sometimes you can do authorization. Some banks let you do authorization via text message. And with him on the phone, that text came in. What's wrong?
No, I understand that. But one time I saw, it was an absolute scam, and it happened exactly the way I said, where they had to somehow spoof and grab my email because they sent it to me and they had to know how to send it to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure what could be the case that could have hacked into the email account, but I think it would be very hard to retrieve an email in transit, if that makes sense.
All right.
Yeah,
all right.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, David. All right, 2 questions, and hopefully they are quick questions. Baxter Thomason, do you have a question?
Yes, I just had a comment. I had a friend that had short passwords, but in addition, they weren't using any type of password keeper. And my understanding is that gives you safety, because if you link to a website like your bank, if it doesn't exactly match the password keeper, website, it won't enter the password automatically.
Okay. So, I mean, password managers at their core are a database. And so there are times when I just have to search the database. I'm not entirely sure I understand what you're saying, but I think what you mean is sometimes it won't automatically autofill, or it won't recognize the website that you're on, whether it's Keeper or 1Password or others. And so I will have to go in, open up the 1Password program, search for that, and copy and paste the password. Is that sound about right? I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
Well, mainly just that you should use that, because it's another blockage that if you click a link, it won't work.
Oh, I see.
It doesn't match.
Gotcha. That does make sense. Yeah. So you're sent to a link that's Amazon with an N instead of Amazon, and your password manager will recognize that that's not the right URL, so it won't try to input the password. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Yes, that's correct. So they didn't want to use a password keeper, and I was trying to encourage them to do that as at least a first pass protection.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, thank you, Baxter. James Cutler, I believe you will be our last question.
Well, it's actually an answer. The issue with suggested passwords, whether it's coming from Safari or whether it's coming from an application out on the web somewhere, somebody else knows either the algorithm that's generating that password, which makes it weaker in some ways. But the biggest problem is if it's an application out on the web somewhere, you have no idea, even if it's an encrypted connection to that site, what's going on that site. So whenever I'm offered the choice of a password, the most automation I'll use is the password generator in 1Password. I will not use an outsider's suggested password.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jim. All right, Heidi, do you have a quick question?
Yes, real quick, with this spam sieve, I have in my Apple program, I have a file for, I forget what it's called, junk, I think. And periodically something gets in there by mistake, and it's something I'm expecting. And actually, then I kind of search and I find it. It went into junk by mistake. And I identify it, and now I get it out of there, and hopefully I'm fixing that. But I know things get in there by mistake, and then for a while I'm not getting certain emails. What happens with spam sieve? It seems to be catching, from what people say, lots and lots of stuff, spam, potential spam. Are you ever able to like go in and look and make sure something hasn't gone in there by mistake? Or is it so good that it doesn't make mistakes?
Oh, if you don't mind, I'll answer this because Josh really doesn't have spam sieve. Spam sieve, when you receive an email message, you will actually train spam sieve. So you select the email message, and there will be a menu where you can tell spam sieve that this message is either spam or it's good. And so it creates what's called a whitelist. And that whitelist is used against all incoming emails. So if you do find something in your junk mailbox that is not junk, you just select it and select the command, train this as good. So that's how that works. We have to stop. We cannot go through any more questions. So try it and use it, and it works great. And I thank you for your question. I thank all of you for your questions. Josh, thank you. You're wonderful. And with that, George, it's all yours.
Josh, thank you very, very much. This was an outstanding meeting. The interaction with our members was fabulous. And if everybody would unmute themselves, you can say a few words. Thank you.
Well done, Josh.
Yeah, good.
Thanks a lot.
You'll leave the meeting. Bye.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
Sam.
you.
Thank you.
Realize how many
Thank you.
people get spammed. Not just you, it's everybody.
Yes, it's everybody.